Honestly, no one wants to think about HIV, but there are things that everyone can do to help prevent it.
Things like PrEP. PrEP stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis, and it means routinely taking prescription medicine before you're exposed to HIV to help reduce your chances of getting it. PrEP can be about 99% effective when taken as prescribed. It doesn't protect against other STIs, though, so be sure to use condoms and other healthy sex practices.
Ask a healthcare provider about all your prevention options.
And visit findoutaboutprep.com to learn more. Sponsored by Gilead.
There are moments in life that are so special that you have to capture them and save them forever. They are one of those once-in-a-lifetime events, like your baby's first steps, the first time you bring your family pet home, or your daughter's first dance performance. With iPhone 15 Pro, more storage means you don't have to delete anything that can become a lasting memory one day. And it's important to be able to share these moments with family members who weren't there to see them in person. Store more, share more. Connect with iPhone 15 Pro on AT&T. Get iPhone 15 Pro on AT&T and get an iPad and Apple Watch for 99 cents per month each. AT&T. Connecting changes everything. Limited time offer. Requires 0% APR 36-month agreement on each. Well-qualified customers. Other terms and restrictions apply. See att.com/iPhone for details.
You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins.
Oh, hey there, everybody. Welcome to this week's show where we're, of course, talking about independent music, punk, hardcore, indie rock, emo, pop punk, whatever. I think I just want to come up with a list of an exhaustive, every single genre possible. But anyways, you are here because you hopefully like this music and you also like discussions with people who create this music, who document it. That is what we do on the show. If this is your first time here, welcome. There's plenty of episodes to dive into. If you like this one, or even if you hate this one, you could probably find one that you do enjoy. Oh my gosh. But this week, I have a great conversation with a person whose work I sincerely admire, and he definitely has not lost his creative spark and step. That is the one Joseph Grillo. He currently plays in a band called Her Head's on Fire, who just released a record on Iodine Records. It's awesome, sort of power pop, I guess you would call it. So, if you like Superchunk and all that sort of stuff, you absolutely will love this. He also played in a band called Garrison that I adored, put out some stuff on Revelation Records. He also played in a band called Instruction that was a post-hardcore sort of supergroup with some members of Quicksand. And he's played in so many different bands, and he's had a lot of experiences within the different elements of the music industry, broadly speaking. And so, I knew he was going to be an interesting conversation, and he proved to be that. So you want to contribute to this show, you just email me, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. Love to hear feedback and guest ideas and all that sort of stuff. I have some pretty exciting episodes coming up that, some of them were inspired by people reaching out, and that's what happens. You can also, if you are willing to support this show for $0, because, I give this stuff to you for free. I mean, obviously I make some dough off of it with advertisements and such, but, just providing this to you on a weekly basis for $0. You can leave a rating and review on the Apple Podcast page, or leave just simply a rating on Spotify. That helps out tremendously. If you want to engage with this show on YouTube, I upload all of the episodes there. So, spread the word. There's also a link in the show notes. If you're like, you know what? I want to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and dive in there and subscribe, and boom, we're off and running. You also like music, right? I have been doing these weekly recommendations, obviously every week on a new episode, because, we all like sharing music and discovering new bands. And there's a link in the show description that compiles all of the music from all the bands that I've recommended on a Spotify playlist. It is a great way for you to get exposed to, new music or music you may have missed. And this, normally I don't really lean into singles because, I personally like full bodies of work, so to speak. But I have been obsessed with this song from a band called Cold God. GAWD. They are a shoegaze band from the Greater Los Angeles area, if I'm not mistaken. They put out a full length a couple years ago on Dias Records, and this new one is coming out on August 30th. And the name of the song is All My Life, My Heart. And then there's a bunch of other stuff. I'm not going to, bore you. I mean, it's a song title, but I'm just not going to, name it here. But toss the song in this playlist. And their new record comes out on August 30th, like I mentioned. It's called I Will Drown on This Earth. This song just like completely captures my attention. And it has me, it's the exact reason that you release stuff before a record comes out. It's just now I'm like anticipating the whole record to be, different shades of this. Cold God I already enjoyed their previous recorded output, but they have leveled up in just, I don't know, textures, catchiness. Like it just feels so lived in and I love it. So that is what I'm recommending to you this week. Cold God, All My Life, My Heart, ... and a bunch of other stuff. But let's talk to Joseph Grillo. Like I said, he plays in a band called Her Head's on Fire, released a full length on Iodine Records. I really enjoy it and love Garrison. And he's always struck me as a very interesting person from all the other interviews that I've read with him. And now we get to dive deep, and he's very thoughtful and talks, a lot of interesting things about Merrimack Valley because they are from the, greater Boston area. And that is so insanely fertile for music. It's crazy. So we go there and a million other places. So here is Joseph right now. I will take you back to probably the early aughts, as it were, when I heard serious heavy drama on what I think was a split promo tape with By a Thread, if I'm not mistaken, where Rev was handing it out, to everybody and anybody in the local scene, as it were, at shows and what have you. And I had no context for the band at all besides listening to that song and being like, I freaking love it. Like, I really, really enjoy what it is that's going on. It's, a mixture of all these, cool, jangly indie rock, some emo, whatever. I find this interesting when you're talking about like bands that are obviously of that, independent nature, where it's like, all right, like pick the lead track or pick the single. And it's like, you don't know what that means. You're just like, this is the song I guess I like the most or whatever. But do you remember having discussions of being like, all right, this is the song that we're kind of like leading with, where people will get introduced to Garrison, broadly speaking? Or was that just like a happy accident of being like, oh, it's the first song of the EP, so here we go?
I think with that one in particular, we knew that it had a sound that was kind of unique, because between the palm muting riff that I was doing and the guitar work that Ed was doing on it and the drums, I really adore the rhythm section of that era of that band. I think there was something about it that felt really fresh to us, because when you're writing music, like you know your touchstones. So even if you're kind of putting Frankensteining together, like, oh, well, this is obviously the Beatles, and then we're obviously ripping off Cap and Jazz here, and then that's obviously Converge, and then, everybody knows this is Yes. They don't know that, but in your mind, you have this running sort of diagram of everything you're kind of ripping off in the early days, because that's how you learn to craft, right? And there was something about that song in particular that looking back, I don't remember what it was influenced by or what I was going for, but it just seemed that I had this riff and a simple melody, and I brought it to the guys, and it just kind of, I was like, wow, I didn't think that drum beat was what the drum beat was gonna be, and wow, Ed, I didn't think you were gonna play that, and wow, Andy's way more melodic here. So that just seemed, from my point of view of a songwriter, that seemed like one of my first creations that felt more true to my voice than I had been in the past, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think
that I was less wearing my influences on my sleeve.
Right. Totally. And I think that the reason I ask that is just because when you start to have people listening to your music from a commercial perspective, and it doesn't have to be, like commercial doesn't have to mean this large thing. It's just like, we're putting out your record, so we like the song the best.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to think about, you're like, wait,
yeah.
do you like, I don't like that song the best. Like, and you start to have this dialogue, which it's a healthy dialogue, but I just find it funny when, especially at that time where bands' first impressions, and still today, bands' first impressions are important, but it's less important now because you can access every single song ever recorded in the music history. Whereas like, the only time a person may hear Garrison is being like, oh yeah, well, this tape that randomly ended up in my hands at a show or whatever. It's like, if I didn't like it, I would have just been like, oh, Garrison's a terrible band. It's like, no, but I didn't think that.
Yeah. I actually think about that a lot. Like, I think that definitely at that time, we were not thinking single in the traditional sense of like what will be hooky enough to get people to listen to us, right? And so I think a lot of bands or a lot of people that work at labels will go, well, that's the track with the most memorable melody, so that will get people to buy the album, and then maybe a certain percentage will listen to more of it and sort of ingest it. My feeling at the time then, and it changed at some point, and now it's back to kind of that same thing, is my goal is to sort of make something that would turn me on if I heard it on the radio at someone's house. I'd be like, whoa, but back up. Like, I remember the first time I heard, like, Rodin, The Everyday World of Bodies. I was like, what the fuck is this? This is, never have I, or Bitch Magnet, or Drive Like Jehu. I wanted to like touch the sound waves. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Now, I'm not saying that our music was ever that sort of groundbreaking, but I'm still trying to make something that makes me feel cool, and cool in the broad way, not in the like ego way, just like makes me feel like, oh, I want more of this, whatever this is.
Right.
So I think that that's what the plan was then. And we just thought, well, this song kind of encapsulates a little bit of all the things we do. But it sounds neat, for lack of a better, I think we were really, sort of glassy eyed about it. And then years later, I was in like, bands on Geffen. I started thinking about like, oh, hooks and drawing people in. But now, to come back to your original point about like everything's available, your music has to be so good because you're in competition with the entire history of recorded music. It's like when you were, 17, like maybe you had 20 records and somebody handed you a tape at a show and you bothered to listen to it more than once and you have a chance. Well, now, like, somebody listened to Her Head's on Fire has to compete with like Sam Cooke. You know what I mean? And like, and their record collection is the entire history of recorded music. And it's like, so fuck, man, how am I going to beat Sam Cooke? How am I going to beat Pink Floyd?
Right.
Like, why are people going to want to choose to listen to me instead of that? And that's the
right. And to be fair, you won't, but you can exist alongside of it.
Yeah, you won't.
Right.
Yeah. It's how does your, like, you'll never be that, like, but how does your voice, and the collective voice of the band sound special? How does it not sound cookie cutter? And I think that's the goal, is to have someone hear it and go, oh, that's just interesting enough. But in my wheelhouse, but I like this. I want more of this.
Absolutely. And well, I'll pull in some of those threads a little bit later, but focusing on you as a person, were you actually born and raised in Worcester, or where did you come up?
It's pronounced, the full pronunciation is Worcester Kid.
There we go. Thank you.
But yes, I was born and raised in Shrewsbury, which is would be considered the mildly affluent suburb of Worcester, where people like electricians like my father lived, the tradesman that he was. But Worcester was the backdrop of my youth up until, I guess, college. I went to the University of New Hampshire, but I would still be back in Worcester a lot, sort of working at the Space with Ed and other people. But until I moved to Boston in 98, 7. Yeah, it was Worcester.
Okay. And your family structure, like mom and dad in the house, brothers and sisters, what did that look like?
Mom, dad, one older brother.
Got it.
And we lived in Shrewsbury public school. You know, it's everybody talking. It was the 70s, so you know, it's like people just like come home when the streetlights go on. You know, like we just played with our neighborhoods. The Brenda and Stacy Millie were 2 doors down and across the street, and they were, you know, Brenda was my brother's age and Stacy was my age, so we were immediately best friends. And then Chris Ferbrata and the Cavarises and Jimmy Montague and Sam Mercanti. You know, it was just my upbringing. Yeah, it was just very, it was lovely.
Right.
You know, I mean, it wasn't it was a different time.
Yes, definitely. And as you started to, you know, grow up in this very quote unquote stereotypical, you know, suburban upbringing, trying to find an identity in the suburbs has been a through line for most subculture in general. And when did you start to, you know, discover that side of things, whether it's, you know, music or whether it was other weird things that like you were into that, you know, your brother wasn't into or your peers weren't into? How did that stuff start to enter your space?
There was a place called The Wag, which is the Worcester Artist Group. And I was very fortunate enough to be friends with a gentleman named Ed McNamara and a gentleman named Todd Droege, and they took me because I probably would have been too afraid to go on my own. And they had open mic nights, and then there's a place called the Coffee Kingdom, which is where everybody hung out. And The Wag was like incredibly formative because it was an art space. You know, it was an illegal warehouse on Harlow Street in Worcester, Massachusetts. And so there was like maybe 5 or 6 people that lived there and had studios in the space. But then the outside was a gallery. Sort of the main space was a gallery. And then part of that main space gallery was also a stage. And, you know, they would put on shows to pay the rent and sort of invite people in to see their work and what they'd done. And it was cool because like not only, you know, sort of the cliche that you hear a lot of people my age talk about, like, oh yeah, like you'd see a hippie jam band and an electro pop band and then a hardcore band and then like a metal band. That's true. But it was also watching these bands in a fucking out there art gallery and being exposed to like visual art that I'd never seen before at the age of 15. And sculpture, really, you know, a lot of industrial sculpture and a band, in fact, called Industrial Sonic Echo, who were ambient music, making, you know, music with instruments that they had built. And that on top of everything else, or like spoken word, this guy, Bill McMillan, who was brilliant and would come out like in like a hajib and like a hatchet and like fake blood and like all these wonderful things that to a young mind were like, what's going on? What's going on? And that was my introduction to art. So I always associated hardcore as something that should be incorporating all these other things.
I love when you start to, even at an early age or at a later age, when you start to make these connections between, you know, art, music, politics, and it all starts to, you know, congeal together to where you understand how one can connect to the other. And it's so cool that you were able to kind of, you know, almost out of the at the jump, be able to recognize the connection between those two.
It was absolutely inspiring and incredible. And I don't think, I think the dividends of that, that experience for me will be paying off, you know, in decades to come. I think I'll probably reflect on it in my 70s and be like, wow, that was really neat, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, it was a blast. I was very, very fortunate.
Yeah, that's awesome. And
because it also gave me something, you know, I mean, the kids in, like you said, kids in the suburbs are so desperate to be down. They so want a real culture. And that one was handed to me. You know, I was like, oh, wow, there's something real here.
Right.
There's something real and I can be a part of it. And I'm invited to the party. You know, that meant the world.
Sure. Absolutely. And from what I only got to see Garrison once, but I've, what existed around you, for, many years as you've been playing in a lot of different bands and what have you. You've always seemed the sort of person where it's like you're comfortable on a stage and, for lack of a better term, performing. But was that kind of always the case, or am I just, looking at this too deeply in regards to like, oh, you seem comfortable, so you probably have always been comfortable on stage?
Are you asking me for my knowledge of musical theater?
If you have that, yes.
No, I'm a theater kid. I started. I had a wonderful teacher named Mr. Feldheimer who would put me in productions starting in the 4th grade. I'd be in these high school productions and performing in front of like 700 people. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. Maybe it's 400 people in the Shrewsbury High School auditorium, and at a young age, and I would do that quite a bit, and then choir and jazz band, and I loved that. I loved theater. I went to college and studied theater. I never wanted to do it after I graduated, but I'm happy I studied it because I'm still quite fascinated by it. But I don't, the thing about it is weird, and I have thought a lot about this too, is I don't, I'm not a character on stage. I did do kind of a character thing with Gay for Johnny Depp, but I'm not really a character on stage. It's kind of just a side of me that I allow to that I let out of the box, I guess.
You know what that feeling is like when you first start to go to shows and you start to experience the awesomeness that is the community. And then like you walk up to a band member and you buy their shirt from them. Oh my gosh, it's so exciting. I so distinctly remember some of the first shirts that I bought. And that is where rockabilly.com can give you some sort of that feeling again. So go to rockabilly.com, use the promo code 100 words or less. That's the number 100 words or less, gets you 10% off your entire order. They are an independently owned and operated company, ships from the Midwest here in the United States of America. And what do? Obviously, they sell merch. They sell officially licensed merch from bands of all shapes and sizes, whether it's, a smaller punk band or whether it's like a gigantic band like Metallica. They have everything you could possibly want. And, there's birthdays, there's holidays coming up. Like, why don't you just go ahead and buy a bunch of stuff and, maybe stash it in your closet. And then that way you can just, let it drip out over the course of all of these, upcoming events and, maybe weddings. What a great wedding present. Just open it up and bam, band merch. So cool. So like I said, it's all officially licensed. That means the bands get paid. Everybody wins in this scenario, including you, when you use the promo code 100 words or less. 10% off your entire order. Thank you, as always, for your continued support, Rockabilly, and support them. Rockabilly.com. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. You know what it's like. You're just rolling through your day. Everything's fine. All of a sudden, you look at your phone, pop into some social media app, and then boom, you're just assaulted with all of these things that frankly weren't bumming you out before. And then you're like, you know what? I'm not as good as this person. I'm not at this point in my life versus this person that's like 10 years younger than me. And then you just start to spiral. It's bad. First of all, put your phone away. Second of all, a great resource is therapy. It is a perfect place for you to be able to disconnect from all of that external noise that influences the way you feel about yourself. I love therapy. I've done it for many years, and I wholeheartedly endorse that practice. And that's why I love working with BetterHelp. Because if you're thinking of starting therapy, please give BetterHelp a try. It's all online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire, and then you get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for zero additional charge. Stop comparing yourself to others and start focusing on yourself with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Ray today to get 10% off of your first month. That's betterhelp.com/Ray. Try it out. Were you did you feel, comfortable from the performance aspect and then attaching, were you a generally outgoing human being as you were, developing your identity as a person in, junior high school and stuff like that?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think I felt it took me an incredibly long time to not always feel awkward, and strange. I wasn't, I didn't get bullied too much. I think because of the theater stuff that people they didn't think I was cool, but they knew who I was. So maybe that saves me, getting shoved into the lockers as many times as sort of my friends. But yeah, it took me a really long time to actually, I think it was experience of working in retail. I think later in life, I worked in a wine shop. I own a wine shop now. And sort of talking to people and working in retail really helped develop an ability, and theater as well, but like an ability to sort of bridge that little gap that we all have when we meet each other at first. But that's been worked on and fought for in my life. It never came naturally.
Yeah. I love that experience of, whatever, if it is your first job at retail, whether it's, working at a, record store, video store, whatever. I mean, I'm talking about jobs that don't exist anymore, but just that idea of connecting with people who are absolute strangers, but they're in there for a reason. And you obviously have to make them feel welcome. So you do your best to be able to present for not only yourself, but obviously the company you work for. And so like that really is training for you to be like, oh, I can use some of those principles towards, booking a show or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate too, because I always worked for mom and pops. So everyone was pretty upfront. They're like, look, no job is worth your self-respect. If someone's an asshole to you, kick them out. You know what I mean? Like I never had to really eat shit, because a customer, because I worked at, I didn't work at like, I don't know what, like a Starbucks or whatever, where you had to be like, yeah, okay, you're really unhappy. I'm going to try and smile. I fortunately never had to do that. But yeah, it's a skill set, man. Like talking to people and bridging that gap and finding the common ground and commonality that we have. It's definitely something that you need to work on continually.
Absolutely. And so your first tastes of music in regards to, stuff that either your parents or your peer group wasn't listening to. I guess this is kind of a two-part question. Was guitar always the entry point for you? And then the second question would be like, what was the first weirdo stuff you started to listen to?
First is no, and second is Pink Floyd. So I grew up in Worcester, born in 1974, right? So in the 1980s, in Worcester, there's a station called WAAF, and WAAF played hair metal and only hair metal. And so there was hair metal, and then there was like pop, whatever was the dance pop on the radio. Just the background of like Hall & Oates and which is great stuff, or like the Cars, but it was pop music, right? And so I was in summer before the 8th grade. I think it was like would it have been a track meet? Some kind of outside thing, but I heard Pink Floyd's The Wall, which is already, I had already been doing a lot of musical theater, and that has a musical theater element to it. It has all these repeating phrases, these themes that come back. There's choruses, there's brass, there's strings. So I was like, whoa, this is awesome. And so I listened to that, 2-3 times a day for, like 8 months or whatever. And then, so I had this opening moment with classic rock, and then discovered like King Crimson and Yes. And so I love the prog aspect of it, right? And then I heard REM and The Cure pretty much simultaneously. And then I went to see REM on the Green tour, which would have been 1988. And then I was hooked at the whole, before it was called alternative, it was called postmodern music. And so that had me, because that seemed to encapsulate a lot more feeling than I was hearing from either the hair metal or the pop that was on the radio at the time.
Sure. And that hair metal era, because I find it so interesting when people that have, gone from that particular scene, like from either literally experiencing the Sunset Strip, like moving there and then moving past it and being like, oh, that was cool. But, it wasn't something that was going to last a long period of time, and feeling like the inauthenticity of it and just the showmanship and being like, I'm not really searching for that. But then finding the aggressive nature of a lot of that music, and then being like, oh yes, like punk or hardcore, like I see the through line there in ways that, other people would never put those two together,
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, hair metal was such a bizarre thing because, they were taking this thing rooted in Bowie and T-Rex and the New York Dolls, this glam, this androgyny thing, and injecting it with like hyper toxic masculinity. Like, I fucking do coke and fuck bitches. Like that whole, yeah. And I just remember hearing most of it. And even though I liked, some of the choruses when I was young, there was something about it that never sat right with me. I was like, this is gross. And I just never liked a lot of it. It never made sense. It always seemed like a very light level form of music. Yeah. Personally.
Service level.
Yeah. And yeah, service level. I mean, it's fine. It's like, I guess it's good to have on while you're crushing Meisterbrows in a field in central Massachusetts. But yeah, I wanted something to speak to the human condition.
There you go. There, step in the door, Pink Floyd and punk and hardcore and everything that comes in after that.
Yeah, that's right.
The something I've always found so interesting in regards to that particular area that you came up in, like the whole, Merrimack Valley hardcore, like how fertile that scene was, not only for hardcore, but just like obviously, Piebald and the litany of bands that came from that particular area and the diverse sounds that came from that area. Because you were, in the middle of it and experiencing a lot of it, like, did you feel that momentum? And I use the word momentum like it's like some, snowball rolling down the hill. It's like, 100 kids at a show at that time probably was, exciting or whatever. But like, did you feel that activity of all these, bands starting and playing VFW halls and stuff like that in that time period?
Yeah. I mean, it was great. It was there. It started to fade not too long after. Well, Nirvana happened and fucked everything up. Like, it was great in a lot of ways, but what it forced everyone to do, because it used to be that, pre-Nirvana, if you were, Smith's fan or a Ministry fan, you were like, we're on the same team, right? And those could not be two more diametrically opposed sounding bands. And then so after, Nirvana, then everything became like sub-scenes, right? Because like you had to be like, no, like I'm specifically into this genre or college rock or whatever it is. And then in the hardcore world, there was this wonderful magical little time where emo bands could play with metal bands, could play with straight edge hardcore bands, could play with like instrumental bands, like post rock bands, before it got so big that everyone felt the need to subdivide again to define their personalities. Because that's what you do. Like when you're a kid, like, especially if you're, white kid from the suburbs, you define your personality by the art you like. And there was a time when, like, yeah, playing shows with Converge and Piebald and Cave In and In My Eyes and 10 Yard Fight and Bane and 6 Going on 7. I can go on and on, Milltown, but like it was great. It felt really, maybe I'm painting it over with gold because I like so much of that stuff, but there was just a mutual appreciation for what was going on.
Sure.
And I've mentioned this before, but Kurt Ballou from Converge is largely a responsible catalyst for that, as is Brian McTurnan, recording engineer, Sad Salad Days, as was Ed McNamara, who ran the space. These were, I mean, everybody was part of it, everybody that did sound, everybody that, hauled gear, but those guys had a real sort of, like, let's fucking do this mentality, like, what do you do? Play this. You can be part of it. You know what I mean? That was, I think, really, really helpful to everybody around, is they felt like we were all kind of on the same team.
Right.
In trying, it was all left of the dial, right? So it was all different.
Right. And I like that encouraging atmosphere, because sometimes I know that people of different, generations or different areas that they grew up with, like there's an element of gatekeeping that obviously exists, just because, you're like, oh, do you even belong here? Like, you haven't gone to enough shows, whatever. It's stupid. Right. But it's like, when you do have people like those you mentioned and others that have that encouraging tone of just like, hey, participate. I don't care what it is that you do. Like, there's something you can be involved with. And I think the more you hear that from more and more people, and especially people that are, in bands or whatever, all it's going to do is make you want to get more involved.
Yeah, you're getting the positive feedback that you're looking for, from the peer group that you want, and so that just makes you want to do more. Exactly. You're just like, this is where I feel I belong. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm still striving, or maybe I'm working to put out my first record, or maybe I'm working to do my first art showing, or whatever it is. Like you feel like, well, at least I'm in the right place.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to eventually be able to, live out whatever piece of art, putting out a demo. I'm going to be able to accomplish that alongside these other people, and then, maybe play a show, and that's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's super exciting.
When you started to, bring this stuff home to your parents, and the idea of like, playing in a band, and were they, clearly they were permissive enough to obviously allow it to happen, but were they like, Joseph is flushing his life down the toilet being in these, dumb bands or whatever? What was their general take on it?
My parents were great, man. They actually encouraged me to study theater in college. I think the band stuff, none of it ever made sense to them. I think maybe they liked theater because theater did make sense to them, right? But none of the music ever resonated. And I remember being probably like right at the same time, 8th grade, like playing that Violent Femmes record, the first one, just like trying to turn it down so they couldn't hear the swear words. And like, it was all weird to them. But they were always supportive, and they were like, wherever I was, whatever I was doing, they're like, have a great show tonight, Joe. And I'm like, please don't come to my shows. Don't listen to my records. It's not for you. You're not the demographic I'm trying to hit. But they were like, we know this brings you something that you can't get anywhere else. So keep going. And they were great. There definitely was the point. There's moments where they're like, so you thought about, getting a job with Health Insurance? And that's natural, but no, for the most part, they're incredibly supportive.
That's awesome. And especially too, where it's like, when you start to pursue like you mentioned, left of the dial life path, that isn't like, because clearly you had an example in the house of your father being involved in a trade and being like, well, of course, Joseph, you are going to mess around with, dials and make sure electricity works or whatever. Like, that practicality of that is sometimes hard to look past. But it obviously sounds like your parents were just like, well, yeah, this is his path.
Yeah. But it was interesting because it was different too, because my dad never taught me anything about electricity. Specifically, he didn't want me to work in the trades. He wanted me to go to college. He worked his butt off, as did my mom, to give us a nice life and try and push us towards, higher learning. But he was just like, no. Cause my dad never went to high school. He had to quit, I think, when he was 13 and go to trade school, or 14, to start making money for his family. So that was like, he didn't want that experience for me. So he, even though he was encouraging things that were like music, which probably wasn't even remotely, it wasn't even the dream of an option for him. He was just like, yeah, do that thing. Just work at it. Just don't half-ass it.
Yeah, no, that's it. I love that. Don't half-ass it, because I think what happens, I know happens, where when parents see that their kids get excited about something, and even if they don't understand it, if they obviously, put a wet blanket over it, and then the kid ends up, hating the parent even more than they normally do during those, tumultuous years, it's like, that's the excitement. You're like, my kid is fired up about something. Okay. Like, let's run with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It should be, you should, shouldn't that be the heights?
Yeah.
Your kid found something they're excited about?
Yeah.
Like that should be it, man. Like,
it should be.
But
yeah, not everybody thinks that way. Was the, cause I know that, Garrison, like, you put out a 7-inch obviously before you signed to Rev and everything. Was Garrison ostensibly your first band that, like, really quote unquote got out there as far as, touring and putting out records and stuff like that? Or did you play in things before that?
Yeah. I had a regional band called Stricken for Catherine, which is like emo prog trying to be like Soundgarden, Rodan kind of thing. But we didn't play outside of New England, and we put out a couple of records, but they weren't distributed really very much. So Garrison was the first. I mean, being on Revelation was a big deal, to me. And yeah, that was the first sort of thing. And then, yeah, obviously we wanted to tour, desperately. So we had done some touring beforehand because actually Kurt Bully from Converge gave me a bunch of numbers. We were writing letters back and forth when I was living in New Hampshire, because we knew each other because our bands had played together, his old band, the Huguenots. And I was like, hey man, how do you book a tour? And he's just like, here's the people you call. And he just, sent me, I don't know, about like 15 phone numbers of people down the East Coast. And so those are the people I called to do Garrison's first tour. And yeah, being and suddenly having distribution was a total trip, and being able to go to places like Europe. I mean, that was crazy. Even the West Coast, that was so many places I've seen, and my experience with seeing them is from the point of view of a touring musician, which is great because you get to see the parts of the town. You don't get to see the Eiffel Tower, you get to see the fucking cool cafe and record store, and you get to, and like I always say, you get to meet the people you would have been best friends with had you grown up in that town. And there's nothing better, that's the best.
Total.
And so, yeah, that was awesome.
I love companies that not only know what they're doing, but it's like, I feel like I could just like work there. And I've joked around with my friends at evilgreed.net on more than one occasion that basically I'm like a glorified employee where I just sing their praises of what it is that they do. And they open, web stores and sell merch, vinyl, all this stuff for bands. They're based out of Berlin, Germany, but don't let that scare you here in the United States because they ship worldwide and the shipping rates are very advantageous for us here in the States. And they have a very specific point of view. Trust me in saying that if you like this show and you like the, wide, diverse range of guests that we bring on, you absolutely will love what Evil Greed has to offer. Like, they offer stuff from, Modern Baseball, Coalesce. They work with labels like Run for Cover, Triple B, Flat Spot, Sargent House, and they just do an amazing job. And like I said, they sell vinyl, they sell shirts, they sell sweatshirts, all that stuff. And it actually reminds me back in the day, like this makes me old, obviously, but like the Very Distro catalog, same sort of vibe where it's basically just being like, oh my gosh, like they have this, they have that. Oh, geez, I'm just going to go ahead and order it all. Like I definitely remember, giving my mom a list of things to order from the Very Distro catalog for like Christmas. So you can do that too, but maybe it's a more modern version where you can just order off the internet. It's great. So evilgreed.net. Poke around their site and you will find bare minimum, like 5 or 6 things that you want to order right off the bat. And then you'll be following along with their journey and get some emails and like, here's new stock updates. They're a great company. So evilgreed.net, have fun, shop.
Hey, this is Jody Sweeten from the podcast How Rude, Tanneritos. As a nostalgic voice from your past, I'm here to remind you that amongst the stressful and chaotic existence we live in 2024, you deserve to get away. It's time for a vacation, no matter when you're hearing this. And let me tell you how you'll get there. The 2024 Hyundai Santa Fe. Want to bring the family to the mountains with the Santa Fe's available H-Track all-wheel drive? Well, it's got standard third-row seating and available dual wireless charging pads for the kids who just want to stare at their phone and not talk to you. You know what I mean. Visit HyundaiUSA.com or call 562-314-4603 for more details. Hyundai, there's joy in every journey.
Were you, because like you said, the relationship with Kurt and, booking shows and stuff like that, did the, business responsibilities fall on your shoulders in Garrison? I mean, I know that usually, obviously it's somewhat of a democracy with, most bands where it's like, oh yes, there's the main communicator that talks to the label and stuff. And then you relay the information to the band and stuff like that. But was that, kind of band dad, for lack of a better term, falling on your shoulders?
Yeah, but it's a double-edged sword. I wanted it because I wanted control, and I really, I really desired this to succeed, not to succeed financially, but to succeed artistically. To do these things was very, and still is very important to me, to have these experiences. And so, yeah, it fell on me. But then eventually, you know, later on, I resented the guys because I felt like I was doing everything. So then you start thinking, oh, I'm doing all the fucking work and booking all the tours and all the label contacts. Maybe I should have more hand in the songwriting. And these are cancerous thoughts. They get in the way, but like, it's just a young mind trying to circle the square. But that was, yeah, I definitely took on most of the sort of managerial aspects.
Right. And I know, like you were talking about the like control aspect, a lot of the times, you know, it just falls on the singer's shoulders because it's just like, oh yeah, that's the person that has the microphone. So I guess we'll talk to them to settle the show and stuff. Did you find, I guess, pleasure out of that? Or was that just kind of like a mantle you knew that if something or someone else was handling it, you probably wouldn't get as much satisfaction out of it?
It depends on the aspects of it. There's certain aspects. I loved learning about the record business. I still do. I liked talking to people at the label about like, oh, okay, so how do you press a record? You know, how does that work? And then what is distribution? And then and I liked, you know, sort of deconstructing record contracts and being like, okay, what does that legalese mean? And sort of applying it to different hypotheticals. The other part, the sort of the show stuff, I wasn't very good at getting paid. I wish I had been better at that. I wasn't particularly forceful when I should have been a little bit more stand up for my guys and advocate for my band and myself. And I should have been like, no, man, you said you were going to pay us $100. You got to pay us $100. I know there's nobody here because Sunny Day Real Estate's in town, but that's what the word guarantee means.
Right.
You know, like, you know, I wish I'd been better at that. And I'm not a particularly good self-promoter. I've got some friends I have a friend named Justin Skirty, and he's amazing at it. Like, to the point where I'm in awe of watching him be like, just walk up to people and be like, hey, you going out next week? They'll be like, yeah. He's like, should have taken my band out. You really fucked that up.
Right.
And then everybody laughs, and I'm just like, dude, that was fantastic. Like, he's got a thing about him. It's really cool. Anyways, yeah, I mean, aspects I liked. I liked knowing the mechanics of it and having an inside seat to that, and talking to lawyers about it. But some of the day-to-day stuff, I like driving.
Okay.
I don't mind loading at all, really. But the getting paid thing used to be a lot harder.
Yeah, definitely was, especially the concept. And I know that you've probably heard or witnessed many of these experiences of taking the promoter to, you know, an ATM to get their money, or it's like that. You, I never ever felt comfortable doing that with a person because, for one, I'm not threatening, and for two, it just feels really weird. And so, sometimes it is necessary to be like, all right, well, dude, I mean, otherwise I can't get to the next show with my band's van or whatever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, that we did that once, but it wasn't me. It was the drummer. It was the drummer we had in at the time. Jay Morissette was a lot more forceful and better at it than I was. And he was like, let's go to the ATM. And I was like, wow, man.
Right.
You're the bulldog.
You're the muscle.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's hard because, you know, we're all learning as we go, and it's not like we all went to like, you know, public relations school. So you're sorting it out. You're figuring out in real time. And sometimes, you know, we all say stupid things or awkward things, and you're just like, no, I didn't mean that. Why did I say that? Yep. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or you just handle things poorly. You know, you don't ask for what you need, and you don't communicate what you can give. Yep. You know, that's, you know, something you learn too.
Absolutely. How did you even get hooked up with Rev in the first place? Like, it's just, you know, when certain bands kind of filter to Rev, you can, you know, as a hardcore punk nerd, like you can kind of trace the lines like, oh, I see how this happened. But for you guys, I never was able to, you know, I mean, besides the fact that you were heavily involved in, you know, the scene, so to speak, in your area, you know, how'd you get discovered, kid?
I sent him a demo tape.
Beautiful.
I sent a bunch of bands. I went through every zine, but this is before Garrison's first tour, right? So we booked a tour. We made a demo tape, recorded it in Kurt's basement, and then we pressed up like, I think 100 cassettes with artwork. And I I just went to the post office and mailed every label that you could see in a zine a copy of it with our touring dates. And, I said, we're Garrison, we're a 4-piece band from Central Massachusetts. These are our touring dates. This is our demo. And sent it to everyone. And when we got back from that first tour, there was an answer on my answering machine from Revelation Records. Somebody in the mailroom had heard it, sent it up the chain. They listened to it and said, we could probably sell some of this, and got reached out. And then started talking.
That's amazing. Was this Jason Upright that you were talking to?
It wasn't. It was Vic Martin, Jason Upright, and I eventually started talking, but not until maybe 2 months, 3 months into the process, I think. I don't remember.
Yeah, no, that's great.
But Jason's fantastic.
Yeah. So both top shelf humans. It's awesome. I guess the life plans, attached to the band, clearly you were focused on that. You were, touring as much as you could. You were putting out music, and, you were very focused on that. Was there any, idea or conceit of the idea or the life outside of the band? Were you kind of trying to, build towards something, or it was no, I'm just going to work in this, general art stuff and then figure things out as they come?
Yeah, there was no life outside of the band. It really wasn't. I lived, ate, breathed music. That genre of music, that style of music, that scene of music, I adored it, and I just, it was everything to me. That was it for the longest time. There was no other life. Jobs were just things you had to pay bills so you could continue to make music, period. Which is what happens to a lot of fellow musicians, is we all do that. And then we do it for a decade, and then we look around, 32, 33, and realize you have no marketable skills. Your band breaks up and you're like, oh shit, I got to get a real job. I can't get a real job. I'm not even qualified to work at McDonald's. So that fear grabs a lot of people in their early 30s. At least it used to. I don't know what it's like now.
Yeah. No, especially too, where you're exactly what you're talking about, where all your life is centered around this, band, and everything else is in service of that. So all you're doing is just, being this transitory human in so many different shapes and forms, that it's oh, wait, what do you mean? I'm not going to tour, 6 months out of the year. I have to figure out what my life looks like outside of that. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's a very shocking. That slaps people in the face. Slapped me in the face, for sure.
I wanted to talk about instruction, because correct me if I'm wrong. You were in instruction for the entirety of the band's short life, or where did you come into play?
No. I joined while they were mixing their full length. I don't play a note on that record. But I toured it. Every show that was in support of that, which were quite a few, for several years. Yes, I was at.
I mean, it's an interesting band for a multitude of reasons. The fact that, I remember when the record came out, and I was already, pot committed to anything that anybody from Quicksand ever touched. So it was one of those things where I was like, oh, this record is good. I was like, it's different, but it's good. And then, the fact that there was traction over in the UK and that sort of stuff. What was it like for you as you started to step into this world that, like you mentioned, the major label world, and being like, oh, this is on a whole different level than anything that I've ever really been used to in the past?
I think the mechanism of the industry is one that takes advantage of young people who don't know better. And I don't think that's anyone's fault in particular. I just think that's how the machinery of it works. Because you come in to a situation and you look around and you're like, these are the people you're meeting at the label. And a lot of them, there's a few that are great. Jen Littleton. There's a few that are really cool, but there's a lot of people that you're like, I wouldn't hang out with you. I don't think you listen to music for the same reasons I listen to music. I don't know if we I don't think you like me. I think you're just saying you like my record. I don't think you've listened to it. And I think you say that to everybody and you can read it a mile away. And that kind of stuff. But then there's also this piece of you that goes, well, maybe this is what everybody did. Maybe this is what the police did. Maybe this is what REM did. I don't know. All I know is I want to continue to work towards this dream I've had for a long time, which is to continue to make art and music. And so you're just, you second guess instincts that you rightfully have about the people you're surrounding yourself with. And then you're like, okay, I think this is how it's done. I don't know. I've never been here before. So there's a lot of that. I found the major label world interesting. I'm happy that I went through sort of boot camp with Revelation. That helped. But I found it very just a machine. You know, people like I couldn't hack it, man. I couldn't play the game. I couldn't be like, you know, people are like, yo, like you're getting introduced to like Evanescence and someone's like, yo, this is Joe, he's in Instruction, they're the hot new thing now. And the guitarist from Evanescence is like, what do you sound like? And I just go, it's 2 guitars, bass, and drums. It sounds like everything you've ever heard before in your life. And I'm just like, why did I do that? I'm a dick. I should have been like, yeah, man, it's cool. Like, but I didn't have the skill set then. You know what I mean? So it's just like, yeah, I couldn't play the game. Certain people were better. Artie was better at it than I was. Artie was very good. Artie was also a lot more personable than I was.
Well, there's definitely, you know, people who are more comfortable existing alongside of, you know, for lack of a better term, you know, civilians, normal people or whatever. And like some of us, it's just like, I don't really want to play that small talk game. Like, yeah. So you're not going to, especially where you're coming from, you're not going to be like, all right, I'm going to just like, you know, completely blow this person's mind by my description of my band. Like that's not going to hold any relevance.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, but I couldn't even like, because at that point, like we were going out, we were touring with like Puddle of Mud and Linkin Park and Korn and Snoop Dogg. And I didn't really like any of that music. I mean, no offense. Like I think a lot of those people are great people and great musicians, but that music didn't resonate with me. Whereas all the touring I'd done previous, most of it was with bands that I would have bought their records, or I would have, you know, it makes sense that we're at the same show. I always felt like I was intruding on their major label world and that I didn't belong.
Right.
That's how it felt.
And I mean, with the, you know, continuation of being involved in a lot of different bands, because I mean, you know, Garrison, Instruction, like you said, you know, gay for Johnny Depp, and, you know, with your current iteration of, you know, Her Head's on Fire, you have continued to not only care about music, but obviously be involved in a really, you know, meaningful way. I realize this may be a big question to unpack, but just like, why do you still care? Why are you still connected to it? Cause I mean, you know, ostensibly, like you don't need to do this anymore per se, but I mean, clearly you do because it's, you know, in your bones, but what keeps you going?
Well, the short answer is it makes me a better dad. It having this aspect of my life be fulfilled makes me a better husband and father, because I feel satisfied and I feel more right with the world, you know, more in place. But you know, I did go through a period of real bitterness for a while about like, why am I not more successful? Why am I watching peers, you know, on MTV and being like, why is that not me? You know, and doing the very typical thing, which is to look outward and say, it's their fault, they suck, or it's the crowd's fault, or it's this label emo, or it's the record label, rather than being like, or maybe I should get better at writing songs. You know, but then I quit music for a while to be a dad. I quit for about 5 years. I have twins, and then I started to get back into it, and I realized how wonderful and important a lot of it was to me, that it just touches this part of my soul. And I love, rather than sort of hating everything and being like bitter and jaded. I'm like, no, I actually love everything. Like I love tones. I love, so much rhythms. I love music. I love melody. I just, there's something about that raises the hair on the back of my neck. And I love creation. There's the, do you make art? Do you play music or do anything artistic? I mean, not to say the podcast isn't.
No, it's okay. I totally understand. Yeah, no, I do. I yell in a hardcore band, so I totally, I feel you.
Oh, so that feeling like when something comes across and suddenly you've been challenged and you've created something you never thought you would, where it almost feels like you don't take responsibility for writing it because it just feels like you pulled it out of the ether, like you were just a conduit for it. That is the feeling. That's the heroine we all keep chasing after, right? And so I'm hopefully, I've tried to put together programs of practice and exploration and challenges and working with different people in different settings and touring and recording with different people to continue to give me that feeling. Because I don't get that feeling usually just sitting alone in my room playing a guitar. I need to collaborate with different people to get that feeling. And so that's what I'm hunting for over and over again. And so, yeah, that's why I keep doing it and will keep doing it. I mean, I think, the term lifers that's used, that me and all my friends, it's like, yeah, man, like there's no, it's not even a question, I mean, as long as I have any small modicum of free time in my life, I want to create something. I want to, because I'm here, because I happen to be alive, and that's pretty fucking fascinating to me. So I want to continue looking at that from different facets, music being one of them. And I don't know how to make film. I'd love to make a film one day. I've written a bit creative writing, but I'd like to write a book one day. These all sound really cool. Maybe one day I'll act again, but all those feelings are really fun. I just like that, puts a little dip in your hip, a little spring in your step.
Fire in your belly.
Makes this brutality of life, makes the brutality of life more bearable.
I agree wholehearedly. Well, Joseph, can I call you Joe, or do most people call you Joseph? I just realized I didn't ask that at the very beginning. Okay.
Joseph.
Well, Joseph, yeah. I really appreciate your time and letting me poke around your brain. You're great.
Thank you, Ray.
Let us go. That was a great discussion, Mr. Joseph Grillo from Her Head's on Fire, Garrison, and I appreciate Rachel, his publicist. Shout out to Rachel. We went through a lot of scheduling conflicts with this, traveling, tours, all that stuff. But anyways, we got it done, and hopefully you enjoyed that conversation. Next week is another person from the Merrimack Valley scene, as it were, Dan O'Connor from 4 Years Strong. You know 4 Years Strong, right? If you have paid attention to independent music, broadly speaking, over the past 10 to 15 years, you have undoubtedly encountered 4 Years Strong. Dan, it was such a great hang. Like, we nerd out pretty deeply about hardcore, and we talk a lot about how that informs the band not only now, but informs him as a person, and it was a great discussion. So next week, Dan O'Connor from 4 Years Strong. And until then, please be safe, everybody. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Trust me in saying that no matter who you are, mental health challenges can affect you, and how you manage them can make all of the difference. That's why everyone should have access to mental health support that meets them where they are and helps them get through. BetterHelp provides online therapy on your schedule. It's flexible, simple to use, and more affordable than in-person therapy. Connect with a licensed therapist selected just for you. Learn more at betterhelp.com. That's betterhelp.com.
Take your business further with the smart and flexible American Express Business Gold Card. It's packed with benefits to help unlock more value from your business purchases. That's the powerful backing of American Express. Learn more at americanexpress.com/businessgoldcard.
Hi, this is Nikki Glazer from the Nikki Glazer Podcast. Say yes to summer and get cash back on many of your favorite brands with PayPal, which, let's face it, comes in very handy during the summertime. Say yes to brunch with the girls. Say yes to new dog poop bags that are kind of the cute ones. You can also send money to friends with PayPal, which means going halvesies when your best friend visits this summer. Saying yes to summertime fun just got a whole lot easier. Make sure to download the PayPal app. An account with PayPal is required to send and receive money. Redeem points for cash and other options. Terms apply.